"Objection! That's a lie!" The scream didn't come from the defense table. It came from the tiny, trembling figure in a floral Sunday dress sitting behind the barrier. "Order! Order in my court!" Judge Theo Cavendish slammed his gavel, the sound cracking like a pistol shot through the humid Georgia air. "He's lying about the deed, Your Honor," the 8-year-old girl shrieked, her eyes swimming with tears but burning with a terrifying intelligence. "Under the quiet title statute, he committed fraud." The courtroom froze. The silence was absolute. The eviction notice wasn't just a piece of paper. It was a physical weight, pressing down on Cassia Vale's chest until she felt her ribs might snap. It was stuck to the peeling paint of apartment 4B with blue painter's tape, a splash of violent pink against the drab gray of the hallway. Cassia stared at it, her grocery bags cutting into her fingers. Inside those bags were generic macaroni, a loaf of clearance bread, and a single chocolate bar she couldn't afford but had bought anyway because Amaya had gotten an A on her spelling test. "Mama?" The voice was small, melodic, and curious. Amaya Rhodes stood at the top of the stairs, her hair braided into 2 neat puffs, her oversized glasses sliding down her nose. She was holding a book almost as thick as her arm. It wasn't a comic book. It was a water-damaged copy of Introduction to Property Law she'd found in the dumpster behind the public library 3 months ago. "Go inside, May," Cassia said, her voice cracking. She tried to rip the pink paper down, but the tape held fast, tearing the paint. "Go inside, baby. Now." Amaya didn't move. Her dark eyes, usually filled with the innocent wonder of second grade, narrowed behind her lenses. She walked forward, her patent leather shoes clicking on the linoleum. She read the paper. She didn't read it like a child sounds out words. She scanned it. "Pursuant to Georgia Code 44750, Amaya whispered, tracing the legal jargon with a small finger. "Demand for possession, failure to pay, unlawful detainer." She looked up at her mother. "Mr. Montfort is kicking us out, but you paid him. I saw you write the money order." "It doesn't matter what I paid, baby," Cassia sobbed, finally ripping the paper free and crumbling it into a ball. "He says we didn't. He says the building is being renovated. He says a lot of things." Rafe Montfort. The name tasted like ash in Cassia's mouth. He was the owner of the Kensington Towers, a dilapidated complex on the edge of Atlanta's gentrifying district. Montfort wasn't just a landlord. He was a titan of industry, a man who wore 3-piece suits that cost more than Cassia made in a year. He was currently sweeping through the neighborhood like a plague, condemning buildings, evicting low-income families, and erecting glass and steel condos in their wake. A heavy tread on the stairs made them both jump. Rafe Montfort himself appeared, flanked by his lawyer, Callum Waverley. Montfort was a handsome man in the way a shark is handsome, sleek, sharp, and utterly devoid of warmth. Waverley was shorter, sweating in the humidity, clutching a briefcase that looked like it was made of alligator skin. "Ms. Vale," Montfort said, his voice a smooth baritone that didn't match the malice in his eyes. "I see you got my love letter." "I paid the rent," Cassia hissed, stepping in front of Amaya. "I have the receipt stubs." Waverley chuckled, a dry, rattling sound. "Receipts for a partial payment, Ms. Vale. And according to the lease addendum you signed 6 months ago, Section 4, Paragraph B, acceptance of partial payment does not waive the landlord's right to evict for the balance. Plus, there's the matter of the nuisance complaints." "Nuisance?" Cassia shouted. "I work 2 jobs. We are quiet. We go to church." "The smell of ethnic cooking," Montfort said, wrinkling his nose as if he smelled something foul right then. "It bothers the prospective buyers of the empty units. It violates the ventilation clause." Amaya stepped out from behind her mother. She was 3 feet tall and looked like a doll, but she held her chin high. "The ventilation clause refers to hazardous fumes," Amaya said clearly. Cooking dinner is implied within the warranty of habitability. And regarding the partial payment, Georgia law states that if a landlord accepts rent after a termination notice, it creates a waiver of the breach. You took the money order yesterday, Mr. Montfort. I saw you put it in your pocket. The hallway went silent. Rafe Montfort looked down, his eyebrows shooting up. He looked at the child, then at the thick book in her hands. He laughed. It was a cold, dismissive sound. Cute, Montfort sneered. You got a parrot, Cassia? Teach it to talk back? I'm not a parrot, Amaya said, her voice shaking slightly but holding firm. I'm a citizen, and you are a predator. Waverly stepped forward, his face reddening. Listen here, you little brat. We'll see you in court on Thursday, Montfort interrupted, checking his gold watch. Pack your bags, Cassia, and maybe pack the kid's mouth too. Judge Cavendish doesn't like noise. They turned and walked down the stairs, leaving a scent of expensive cologne and impending doom. Cassia sank to the floor, weeping into her hands. She didn't see Amaya open the book, flip to a dog-eared page, and begin to read. The office of the public defender was a chaotic hive of ringing phones, overflowing file cabinets, and coffee stains. Rowan Hart sat at his desk, rubbing his temples. He was 26, fresh out of law school, and already drowning. He had 45 active cases. He hadn't slept in 2 days. When Cassia Vale walked in, holding the hand of a little girl in glasses, Rowan wanted to tell them to leave. He wanted to say he couldn't take another eviction case, that they were impossible to win against guys like Montfort. But then he saw Cassia's eyes. They were the eyes of a woman who had run out of road. Mr. Hart, the receptionist said, this is the Vale case. The eviction hearing is in 48 hours. Rowan sighed and gestured to the chairs. Ms. Vale, I've looked at the file. I'll be honest with you, Montfort has Callum Waverly representing him. Waverly he's a butcher. He's going to argue breach of contract and nuisance. Do you have anywhere else to go? No, Cassia whispered. Nowhere. The shelter system is full, Rowan muttered, mostly to himself. He began flipping through the paperwork. Okay, we'll try to argue for an extension, a hardship stay. Maybe get you 30 days to find a place. 30 days? Amaya spoke up. She was sitting in the corner chair, her legs swinging, not touching the floor. She had a notepad on her lap. We don't want 30 days. We want to stay. It's an illegal eviction. Rowan smiled sadly. Sweetheart, the law is complicated. It's not about what's fair. It's about what's in the contract. The contract is unconscionable, Amaya said. Rowan paused. He looked at the girl. That's a big word. It means it's so unfair that it shocks the conscience, Amaya replied matter-of-factly. Under Williams v. Walker Thomas Furniture Co. A contract can be voided if there is an absence of meaningful choice on the part of one of the parties together with contract terms which are unreasonably favorable to the other party. Rowan's pen dropped from his hand. He stared at the 8-year-old. She wasn't reading from a phone. She was just looking at him. She likes to read, Cassia said apologetically. She reads everything. The backs of cereal boxes, the terms of service on my phone, the old encyclopedias at the library. Since her daddy left, she just wants to know how the rules work so she doesn't get hurt again. Rowan leaned forward, intrigued, despite his exhaustion. Where did you hear about Walker Thomas? I read it in the library, Amaya said. And Montfort's lease has a hidden clause on page 9. It says he can evict without cause if the property value increases by 20%. That's an illusory promise, isn't it? Because he controls the renovation that increases the value. It creates a lack of mutuality. Rowan grabbed the lease from the file. He flipped to page 9. There, buried in dense 8-point font, was the clause Amaya had mentioned. He had missed it. He, a barred attorney, had missed it. Holy smoke, Rowan breathed. Is that good? Cassia asked, hope flickering in her chest. It's a fighting chance, Rowan said, looking at Amaya with new respect. But Waverly will tear this argument apart. He'll say you signed it, so you're bound by it. He'll bury us in procedural motions before I can even make the argument. Then we have to be faster, Amaya said, hopping off the chair. She walked over to Rowan's desk and pointed to a stack of papers. And we need to subpoena his maintenance records. The renovations he claims are raising the value, they don't exist. He's just painting the doors red. Rowan looked at the child, really looked at her. He saw the fierce determination in her jaw, the way her small hands gripped the edge of his desk. This wasn't just a smart kid. This was a prodigy forged in the fire of poverty. Amaya, Rowan said softly, you can't talk in court. You know that, right? The judge won't allow it. I know, Amaya said. I'll just write you notes. Rowan laughed, a sound of genuine disbelief. All right, we're going to war. But you have to promise me one thing. If Judge Cavendish tells you to sit down, you sit down. He's old school. He believes children should be seen and not heard. I promise, Amaya lied. Thursday morning dawned gray and oppressive. The Fulton County Courthouse was a massive, imposing structure of limestone and granite, designed to make anyone walking through its doors feel small. Courtroom 402 smelled of floor wax, old wood, and fear. Judge Theo Cavendish sat on the bench like a gargoyle. He was a man in his late 60s, with a face carved from granite and a reputation for having zero patience for frivolous delays. He was known to favor landlords, believing firmly in the sanctity of property rights. At the plaintiff's table, Rafe Montfort looked like he owned the place. He was whispering to Callum Waverly, who was arranging neat stacks of documents. They looked relaxed, bored even. At the defense table, Rowan Hart looked like he was vibrating. His suit was cheap and ill-fitting compared to Waverly's tailored silk. Cassia sat beside him, gripping a crucifix so hard her knuckles were white. And there, sitting on a bench directly behind the defense bar, was Amaya. Her feet dangled inches above the floor. She had a composition notebook open on her lap and a yellow No. 2 pencil in her hand. All rise, the bailiff bellowed. Judge Cavendish swept in, his black robes billowing. Be seated. Calling case number 24CV0091, Montfort Properties LLC versus Cassia Vale. Ready for the plaintiff, Your Honor, Waverly boomed, standing up with an easy confidence. Ready for the defense, Your Honor, Rowan said, his voice squeaking slightly before he cleared his throat. Mr. Waverly, proceed, Cavendish grunted, not looking up from his docket. Waverly walked to the center of the room. He didn't use notes. He was a performer. Your Honor, this is a simple case of breach of contract. The defendant, Ms. Vale, is 2 months behind on rent. Furthermore, she has violated the nuisance clause of her lease, creating an environment that is hostile to other tenants. My client, Mr. Montfort, has been more than patient. He is a pillar of this community, trying to improve the neighborhood, and Ms. Vale is an obstruction. Waverly placed a document on the judge's bench. Exhibit A, the payment ledger showing the missing funds. Exhibit B, affidavits from neighbors regarding the smells and noise. Rowan stood up. Objection, Your Honor. The neighbors listed in those affidavits are employees of Mr. Montfort's shell company. They don't live in the building. Waverly spun around. That is a baseless accusation, Your Honor. Mr. Hart is desperate. Sustained, Cavendish said, looking at Rowan over his spectacles. Mr. Hart, unless you have proof of employment for these witnesses right now, sit down. Rowan froze. He knew it was true. Amaya had told him the neighbors were the construction crew, but he didn't have the payroll records. He hadn't had time to get the subpoena. I can get the records, Your Honor, if we have a continuance, Rowan stammered. Motion denied, Cavendish snapped. This court is not a daycare for unprepared attorneys. Rafe Montfort smirked. Cassia let out a low whimper. From the bench behind them, a soft scratching sound was audible. Amaya was writing furiously. She tore a page out of her notebook and folded it. She tapped Rowan on the shoulder. Rowan ignored her. He was panicking. Your Honor, Rowan tried again. The lease itself contains an unconscionable clause regarding property value. The defendant signed it, Waverly interrupted smoothly. Are you suggesting Ms. Vale cannot read? That she is incompetent? No, Rowan faltered. Amaya tapped him again, harder, a sharp poke to his shoulder blade. Rowan reached back blindly and took the note. He unfolded it under the table. In neat block handwriting, it read, "Ask about the certificate of occupancy. If he is renovating, he needs a new one. If he doesn't have it, the lease is illegal ab initio from the start." Rowan blinked. He looked at the note. He looked at Amaya. She gave him a tiny, imperceptible nod. Rowan stood up, his posture straightening. Mr. Waverly, you mentioned your client is renovating the building extensively, raising the property value. That is correct, Waverly said, suspicious of the sudden confidence. Your Honor, Rowan addressed the judge. If the building is undergoing extensive renovation sufficient to trigger the eviction clause, the landlord is required under City Ordinance 12B to file for a new certificate of occupancy to ensure safety standards. I move to dismiss the eviction on the grounds that the lease is void because the building is currently operating without a valid certificate. The room went quiet. Waverly's smile faltered. He looked at Montfort. Montfort stopped smirking. Judge Cavendish paused. He looked at Waverly. Counsel, do you have the certificate of occupancy? Waverly shuffled his papers. Your Honor, that is a bureaucratic technicality. It is not relevant to the non-payment of rent. It is relevant, Rowan pressed, channeling the energy of the 8-year-old behind him. Because if the building is not certified for occupancy due to construction hazards, he cannot legally collect rent. The contract is void. Cavendish narrowed his eyes. Mr. Waverly, approach the bench. As the lawyers huddled, Cassia turned to Amaya, her eyes wide. How did you know that? She whispered. I saw the orange sticker on the window of the basement, Amaya whispered back. It expired in 2019. The judge sent the lawyers back. I am going to take this motion under advisement, Cavendish said, his voice annoyed. However, the plaintiff has also alleged non-payment. Even if the lease has issues, if Ms. Vale is living there, she owes for the space. Mr. Waverly, continue with your witness. Waverly, looking rattled but dangerous, called Rafe Montfort to the stand. Montfort adjusted his tie and sat in the witness box. He exuded charisma. He painted a picture of himself as a benevolent businessman trying to clean up the city, and Cassia as a leech. I tried to work with her, Montfort lied smoothly. I offered her a payment plan. I offered to help her move. She refused everything. She screamed at me. She terrified my staff. Rowan cross-examined him, but Montfort was slippery. He had an answer for everything. Rowan was losing momentum. The technicality about the certificate was good, but it wasn't a knockout blow. They needed to prove Montfort was lying about the money. Mr. Montfort, Rowan said, Ms. Vale claims she paid you in full via money order. I never received it, Montfort said, looking the jury, which was actually just the judge in this hearing, though a jury trial had been requested for damages, dead in the eye. If I had, I would have deposited it. You didn't put it in your personal pocket? Absolutely not. That would be commingling funds. Illegal and unethical. Rowan looked down at his table. He had nothing. No video, no witness other than Cassia. It was her word against a billionaire's. Suddenly, a small voice piped up from the gallery. Ask him about the ledger. Judge Cavendish's head snapped up. Who said that? Rowan froze. Amaya was standing up. Sit down, Amaya, Cassia hissed. Young lady, Judge Cavendish boomed, pointing his gavel. This is a court of law. One more outburst and I will have the bailiff remove you. Amaya didn't sit. She stood gripping the wooden railing, her knuckles white. He's lying, Your Honor. The ledger is fake. Remove her, Cavendish ordered the bailiff. "Wait!" Rowan shouted, throwing his hands up. "Your Honor, please! She's the defendant's daughter. She's upset." "I'm not upset," Amaya said, her voice surprisingly steady, though her legs were shaking. "I'm observant. Mr. Montfort is holding a blue folder. The ledger inside it. I saw him print it." "That is enough," Waverley shouted. "Your Honor, this is a circus." "I saw him print it at the library 3 days ago," Amaya yelled, the words rushing out now. "He was at the public library because his office printer was broken. I saw him. He used the computer in the back row." The bailiff was reaching for Amaya's arm. "Stop!" Amaya screamed. "The timestamp. Ask him to show the bottom of the page. Real ledgers are generated by accounting software. That one has a URL at the bottom from https www.google.com, search QKey, printyourdocs.com. The courtroom went deathly silent. The bailiff hesitated. Judge Cavendish looked at Rafe Montfort. Montfort was clutching the blue folder to his chest, his face suddenly pale. "Mr. Montfort," Judge Cavendish said, his voice dropping to a dangerous rumble, "hand that folder to the bailiff." "Your Honor, this is ridiculous," Waverley stammered. "It's confidential work product." "Hand it over." Montfort hesitated. Then, with a look of pure venom directed at the 8-year-old girl, he handed the folder to the bailiff. The bailiff walked it to the bench. Cavendish opened it. He put on his reading glasses. He looked at the bottom of the page. He looked up. The expression on his face was terrifying. "Mr. Waverley," the judge said softly, "why does this official ledger have a footer that says Template 4, free download?" The shock in the room was palpable. A collective gasp went through the few spectators. But Rafe Montfort wasn't done. He stood up in the witness box, his face twisting into a sneer. "It's a copy of the original. So what? She still didn't pay." "I did pay," Cassia cried out. "Prove it!" Montfort roared, losing his cool. "You have nothing. You are a nobody living in my building on my charity." Amaya, still standing, looked at the judge. "Your Honor," she said, her voice trembling but loud. "May I approach the bench? I have the proof. It's not a receipt. Not a—" Cavendish looked at the child. He looked at the fraudulent document in his hand. He looked at the sweating billionaire. "Approach," Cavendish said. Amaya opened the little gate. She walked into the well of the court. She looked tiny next to the podium. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small black rectangle. It was a USB drive. "What is that?" Waverley demanded. "Security footage," Amaya said. "From the hallway camera. Mr. Montfort thought he turned them all off, but he forgot the one in the laundry room that points at the mailboxes." Montfort's eyes bulged. "I hacked the IP address," Amaya said simply. "The default password was admin. I have video of Mr. Montfort taking the envelope from our mailbox on Tuesday at 4 p.m., the envelope with the money order." Pandemonium erupted. Waverley slammed his hand on the table. "Objection! Authentication! Chain of custody!" "Overruled!" Cavendish bellowed, slamming his gavel so hard the handle nearly cracked. "Bailiff, plug that into the monitor, now!" The screen flickered to life. Grainy, black and white footage, but clear enough. There was Rafe Montfort looking over his shoulder. He reached into the broken mailbox labeled 4B. He pulled out a white envelope. He opened it. He smiled. He put it in his pocket. The video ended. Judge Cavendish slowly took off his glasses. He looked at Rafe Montfort, who had collapsed back into the witness chair, looking like a deflated balloon. "Mr. Waverley," the judge said, his voice icy, "you might want to advise your client of his Fifth Amendment rights against self-incrimination, because I am about to refer this matter to the district attorney for perjury, fraud, and theft." Amaya stood in the center of the court, the little girl who had just toppled a giant. She didn't smile. She just looked at Rafe Montfort, her eyes hard. "That," she whispered, "is called res ipsa loquitur. The thing speaks for itself." Karma had just walked into the room and she was wearing a floral Sunday dress. The victory in courtroom 402 felt momentous, But in the world of high-stakes real estate and deep corruption, triumph is often just a prelude to a harsher punishment. Rafe Montfort was arrested, yes, marched out of the courtroom in handcuffs while local news cameras flashed, but he was a man with the GDP of a small nation in his bank account. He made bail within 2 hours. By Friday morning, the narrative had already shifted. Cassia Vale sat at her kitchen table, staring at the small television. The news anchor was speaking gravely. Real estate mogul Rafe Montfort claims the doctored footage shown in court was a deep fake, part of a sophisticated smear campaign orchestrating by radical anti-development activists utilizing a child as a prop. "They're lying," Cassia whispered, her hand trembling as she reached for her coffee. "They're turning it around on us." Amaya was on the floor, surrounded by stacks of paper she had printed at the library before they were banned. She didn't look up. She was cross-referencing zoning maps with tax liens. "It's a diversionary tactic," Amaya said, her voice calm but her brow furrowed. "Under the federal rules of evidence, the video was authenticated by the metadata. But he's trying to win the court of public opinion to pressure the district attorney into dropping the charges." "It's not just the DA I'm worried about, May," Cassia said, looking at the door. "It's him. Men like that. They don't get mad. They get even." A heavy pounding on the door made the coffee in Cassia's mug ripple. Cassia froze. Amaya scrambled up, grabbing her notebook. "Cassia Vale? Child Protective Services. Open up!" The blood drained from Cassia's face. She looked at Amaya. This was the one threat no amount of case law could easily shield them from: the terror of separation. Cassia opened the door. Standing there was a woman with a severe bob haircut and a clipboard, flanked by 2 uniformed police officers. Behind them, leaning against the hallway wall with a smirk playing on his lips, was Callum Waverly, Montfort's lawyer. "Ms. Vale," the social worker said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. "I'm Officer Garris. We received a credible report regarding the welfare of a minor in this residence. Allegations of neglect, unsafe living conditions, and psychological exploitation." "Exploitation?" Cassia gasped, backing up. "I love my daughter. I work 2 jobs to feed her." "The report suggests you are coaching your daughter to perform legal stunts, exposing her to adult conflicts and high-stress environments suitable only for trained professionals," Garris said, scanning the apartment. Her eyes landed on the peeling paint, which Montfort refused to fix, and the lack of furniture, which they had sold to pay legal fees. "And the living conditions appear substandard." "Because the landlord won't fix the pipes," Cassia cried. "That's a matter for housing court," Garris said dismissively. "My concern is the child." She turned to Amaya. "Hello, sweetie. You must be Amaya. I bet you'd like to go somewhere with nice toys and no scary courtrooms, wouldn't you?" Amaya adjusted her glasses. She stood perfectly still, looking at Garris, then at the police, and finally at Waverly lurking in the hall. "Officer Garris," Amaya said, her voice clear and bell-like. "According to the Georgia Department of Human Services Child Welfare Policy Manual, Section 2104, an investigation requires present danger or impending danger to justify immediate removal. Poverty is not a crime, nor is it grounds for removal under Santosky versus Kramer." Garris blinked. The police officers exchanged a glance. "Furthermore," Amaya continued, stepping between the social worker and her mother, "the allegations of psychological exploitation are subjective and retaliatory. That man in the hallway, Mr. Waverly, represents the landlord we just defeated in court. His presence here suggests this visit is not a neutral welfare check, but an instrument of harassment, which is a violation of your department's ethical code." "Listen, kid," Garris started, her professional veneer cracking. "I am recording this interaction," Amaya said, pulling a cheap burner phone from her pocket. "Georgia is a one-party consent state. If you remove me without a court order signed by a juvenile court judge based on a malicious tip from an opposing litigant, I will ensure my mother sues the county for violation of her 14th Amendment rights to family integrity, and we will win again." Waverly's smirk vanished. He pushed off the wall and whispered something to the social worker. Garrus turned red. She looked at the peeling paint, then at the fierce little girl holding the phone like a shield. She realized that removing this child right now with a camera rolling and that level of articulation would be a PR nightmare. "We will be conducting a full investigation," Garrus snapped, backing out of the door. "This isn't over, Ms. Vale. Fix this place up or we will be back with that order." She stormed out. The police followed. Waverly lingered for a second, his eyes locking with Amaya's. He didn't look arrogant anymore. He looked like a man who realized he was hunting a tiger, not a rabbit. When the door clicked shut, Cassia collapsed onto the floor, pulling Amaya into her arms. She sobbed, rocking back and forth. "I was so scared," Cassia wept. "I was so scared." Amaya hugged her mother back, her small hands gripping Cassia's shirt. "I know, Mama. I know." But over her mother's shoulder, Amaya's eyes were dry. They were cold. She knew they had just survived a skirmish, but the war had shifted. Montfort wasn't just trying to evict them anymore. He was trying to destroy them. And to stop him, she needed to find the one thing he was hiding. The thing that made a run-down apartment building in a poor neighborhood worth killing for. Rowan Hart's office looked like a hurricane had hit a paper factory. Boxes of discovery documents were stacked to the ceiling. It was 11 p.m. on a Saturday, 3 days after the CPS raid. "It doesn't make sense," Rowan muttered, rubbing his eyes. He was running on caffeine and sheer stubbornness. Why fight this hard? Montfort owns half of Atlanta. Why does he care so much about Kensington Towers? The land value is rising, sure, but the legal fees alone are costing him more than the building is worth. Amaya was sitting cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by maps. She was eating the chocolate bar Cassia had finally been able to buy her. "It's not the building," Amaya said, her mouth full of chocolate. "It's the geometry." Rowan spun his chair around. "The what?" "Look at the city plan," Amaya said, pointing to a large map she had taped to the filing cabinet. "Montfort is building the Azure District, that massive luxury complex downtown. It's 6 blocks of glass skyscrapers." "Right. Everyone knows that. It's his flagship project." "Look at the shape," Amaya insisted. She traced the perimeter of the project with a marker. It was a perfect square except for one notch, a missing piece. "Kensington Towers," Rowan realized. "We're the missing piece. He needs the land to complete the square." "Not just to complete it," Amaya corrected. "I read the zoning application he filed 3 years ago. He applied for a superblock variance. It allows him to build 50 stories higher than the limit, but only if the lot size exceeds 10 contiguous acres. Without our building, he's under the limit. He can't build the towers. So if we stay, he loses hundreds of millions in potential revenue," Rowan whistled. "That explains the desperation. But he owns the building. Eventually he can evict everyone, right? Why the rush? Why the fraud?" "Because he doesn't own it," Amaya said softly. Rowan stopped breathing for a second. "What?" "I went back to the quiet title statute," Amaya said, opening her water-damaged textbook. "And I looked up the history of our building. Montfort bought it in 2018 from the estate of a man named Elias Thorne. Thorne died in 1995. The building sat in probate limbo for 20 years. Okay. Montfort filed a quiet title action in 2018, Amaya continued, pulling out a photocopy of an old court filing. He claimed he had bought the tax liens and that there were no living heirs to object. The judge granted him the title by default because no one showed up to contest it. "Standard practice for abandoned properties," Rowan shrugged. "But Elias Thorne did have an heir," Amaya said. She pulled out a printed obituary from a frantic search she'd done on Rowan's computer earlier. His granddaughter, Elara Thorne. She moved to France in the 90s. She died in 2019. So she was alive when he filed the action, Rowan said, sitting up straighter. Did he notify her? The affidavit of service says he published a notice in the Atlanta Daily World because her whereabouts were unknown. But look at this. Amaya slid a piece of paper across the floor. It was an email printout. How did you get this? Rowan asked, terrified to know the answer. I didn't hack anything this time, Amaya said innocently. I looked through the discovery dump Waverly sent over. He buried thousands of irrelevant emails in the file to waste our time. He thought we wouldn't read them. He thought we were lazy. Rowan picked up the paper. It was an email from Rafe Montfort to Callum Waverly, dated 2 weeks before the quiet title hearing in 2018. Subject, The French Problem. Body. We found the granddaughter. She's in Lyon. She has no idea she owns the building. Do not contact her. Proceed with publication notice in local papers only. By the time she figures it out, the statute of limitations will have run out. Rowan felt a chill go down his spine. This wasn't just eviction fraud. This was grand larceny. This was a felony that could put Montfort in prison for 20 years. He stole the building, Rowan whispered. He committed fraud on the court to steal the land. And if the title is void, Amaya said, her eyes gleaming, then he's not our landlord. He's a trespasser, and he has no standing to evict anyone. This is it, Rowan said, standing up and pacing. This is the nuclear option. If we present this to Judge Cavendish, Montfort is done. The Azure District project collapses. We need the original deed, Amaya said, and we need to prove that he knew. This email is a copy. He'll claim it's fake, just like the video. We can subpoena the server, Rowan said, energized. Now that we have a specific date and subject line, we can force them to produce the original metadata. Amaya, you're a genius. I know, she said simply, but we have to be careful. If he knows we have this, he won't send CPS next time. Rowan looked at the small girl. He felt a sudden surge of protective fear. You're right. We sit on this until the hearing on Tuesday. We ambush him, in open court where he can't hurt you. Tuesday, Amaya nodded. We just have to survive until Tuesday. But the universe, and Rafe Montfort, had other plans. Monday afternoon was heavy with rain. The sky over Atlanta was the color of a bruised plum. Cassia was at her second job scrubbing floors at the hospital. Amaya was at the babysitter's, Mrs. Gable, a kindly neighbor on the 3rd floor who smelled of peppermint and old wool. Amaya was sitting by the window, watching the street. She had a bad feeling. The kind of feeling she got when the barometer dropped before a storm, or when Montfort smiled. A black SUV pulled up to the curb. 2 men in suits got out. They weren't police. They weren't lawyers. They looked like the kind of men who broke things for a living. Amaya grabbed her backpack. She had prepared it days ago. Her notebook, the USB drive with the backups, a bottle of water, and her inhaler. Mrs. Gable, Amaya said, urgency creeping into her voice, I need to go to the bathroom. Go ahead, sugar, the old woman said from her recliner. Amaya went to the bathroom, locked the door, and climbed out the window onto the fire escape. She was small and quick. She scrambled up the iron stairs, not down. The roof was safer. From the roof edge, she peered down. The men were kicking in the front door of the building. Her phone buzzed. It was Rowan. Amaya? Get out of there! Police are raiding your apartment. They claim they found narcotics in Cassia's locker at work. They planted it! Amaya screamed into the phone, the wind whipping her hair. They're framing her! I know! I'm at the precinct now. They've arrested her, Amaya. They're coming for you. CPS has an emergency removal order signed by a different judge, Judge Vance. He's one of Montfort's golf buddies. You have to hide. I'm on the roof, Amaya said, tears stinging her eyes. Rowan, they're going to take me. Stay put. I'm coming. But he was too late. The roof access door banged open. The 2 men in suits stepped out. One of them held a radio. Subject located, north roof. Amaya backed away until her heels hit the parapet. The drop was 4 stories. "Don't come closer," she yelled. "I know my rights." "Kid, we're not cops," one of the men sneered. "But the cops are downstairs. We're just here to make sure you don't fall." He lunged. Amaya tried to dodge, but she was 8 years old. The man grabbed her arm, lifting her off her feet. She kicked and screamed, biting his hand. "Let me go! Habeas corpus! You have no warrant!" "Shut up, you little lawyer," the man grunted, dragging her toward the door. They hauled her down the stairs, past a terrified Mrs. Gable, and out onto the street. A CPS van was waiting, lights flashing. Officer Garris was there, looking triumphant. "I told you I'd be back," Garris said as the men shoved Amaya toward her. "This is kidnapping," Amaya shrieked. She saw neighbors watching from windows, too scared to intervene. "Call Rowan Hart. Tell him they took the evidence." One of the men ripped the backpack from her shoulders. "No!" Amaya screamed, her soul tearing in two. "Give it back!" "Personal effects will be processed," Garris said cold-heartedly. She shoved Amaya into the back of the van and slammed the door. Amaya threw herself against the reinforced glass, watching the man in the suit open her backpack. He pulled out the notebook. He pulled out the USB drive. He smiled and gave a thumbs up to someone in the black SUV. Rafe Montfort rolled down the back window of the SUV. He looked at the CPS van. He raised a hand and waved a slow, mocking goodbye. The van peeled away, sirens wailing. Amaya slid down to the metal floor of the cage. She was alone. Her mother was in jail. Her evidence was gone. The law, which she had worshipped like a religion, had been twisted into a weapon to bludgeon them. She pulled her knees to her chest. For the first time since this nightmare began, she didn't recite a statute. She didn't plan a defense. She just cried. She cried like the child she was, small and broken in the back of a state vehicle. But as the tears fell, a cold resolve began to harden in her chest. Montfort had made a critical error. He had taken her notebook. He had taken the drive. But he hadn't taken her mind. He had forgotten the most important rule of procedure, jeopardy attaches when the jury is sworn. And the jury hadn't heard her testimony yet. Amaya wiped her face. She adjusted her glasses even though no one was there to see. "Discovery is over," she whispered to the empty van. "Now we go to trial." The Sunnyvale Group Home for Youth was neither sunny nor a home. It was a holding pen that smelled of industrial disinfectant and despair. Amaya sat on a bottom bunk in room 3B, her knees pulled to her chest. She had been there for 48 hours. They had taken her glasses for safety, leaving the world a soft, terrifying blur. They had taken her burner phone. They had taken her books, but they hadn't taken her voice. "Hey!" a voice whispered from the top bunk. "New girl, you crying?" Amaya squinted. A boy, maybe 12, hung his head over the edge. His name was Marcus. "No," Amaya said, her voice raspy. "I'm plotting," Marcus snorted. "Plotting what? An escape? Forget it, the windows are alarmed. Mrs. Hatcher sleeps with the keys." "I don't need to escape," Amaya said. "I need a phone, a landline." "Office is locked," Marcus said. "Only time we go in there is for counseling, which is just Hatcher yelling at us." Amaya sat up. "Does Mrs. Hatcher have a supervisor?" "Yeah, Mr. Henderson. He comes on Tuesdays." "Today is Tuesday," Amaya said. She stood up, her blurry vision clearing with focus. "Marcus, I need you to start a riot." "What? You crazy?" "Not a violent one," Amaya clarified. "A constitutional one. What time is lunch?" "Noon. Sloppy Joe's." "Perfect." At 12 p.m., the cafeteria of Sunnyvale was filled with the clatter of plastic trays. Mrs. Hatcher, a woman who looked like she chewed lemons for recreation, stood guard by the door. Amaya stood up on her bench. She clapped her hands. The room went quiet. "Attention, everyone," Amaya announced. her voice projecting like she was in a lecture hall. According to the Georgia Foster Children's Bill of Rights, Section 15, Paragraph C, every child has the right to unmonitored communication with their attorney or guardian ad litem. Mrs. Hatcher stormed over. Sit down, Amaya. We don't do speeches here. I have been denied access to my attorney for 2 days, Amaya continued, ignoring her. This constitutes a violation of my Sixth Amendment rights and grounds for a civil rights lawsuit against this facility. Who else here has been denied a phone call? Marcus stood up. I haven't talked to my lawyer in a month. A girl at the next table stood up. They told me my lawyer quit. I never got to check. This is unlawful imprisonment, Amaya shouted. We demand the phone, now! Sit down, Hatcher shrieked, reaching for her radio. But the room was already chanting, Phone! 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 The door swung open. A man in a suit walked in, Mr. Henderson, the supervisor. He looked at the chanting children, then at the red-faced Mrs. Hatcher. What is going on here? Henderson demanded. Amaya stepped forward. She looked tiny in her oversized sweatsuit, but she held herself like a queen. Mr. Henderson, she said, my name is Amaya Rhodes. My mother, Cassia Vale, is currently detained. My attorney is Rowan Hart. Mrs. Hatcher has refused to let me contact him regarding my testimony in an active criminal trial. If I do not speak to him in the next 10 minutes, I will personally draft a writ of mandamus and have every child in this room sign it as a class action plaintiff against the Department of Human Services. Henderson stared at her. He looked at the other kids, who were nodding vigorously. He didn't know what a writ of mandamus was, but he knew what class action meant. It meant news crews. Hatcher, Henderson barked. Give her the phone. But sir, now! Amaya took the cordless phone. She dialed Rowan's number from memory. He answered on the first ring. He sounded wrecked. Hello? Rowan, it's me. Amaya, oh my God, are you okay? I'm in court right now. Judge Cavendish is about to rule on the dismissal motion. Waverly is destroying us. He says we have no evidence. I know, Amaya said. Listen to me carefully. I didn't just put the files on the drive. I knew they would come for me. What did you do? Do you have your laptop in court? Yes. Go to the Fulton County Superior Court website. Public records search. Okay, I'm there. Search for case number 19CV000. Amaya, that's a dummy number. It's for test filings. It's a junk folder. Exactly, Amaya said. Montfort's hackers scrubbed your email. They scrubbed my cloud. But they didn't scrub the court's own junk docket. I uploaded the French deed and the email as a test filing 3 days ago. It's time-stamped by the court's own server. Rowan gasped. You hid the evidence inside the court system itself. Hide in plain sight, Amaya said. Now get me a transport order. I'm coming to testify. Courtroom 402 was a pressure cooker. Rafe Montfort sat at the plaintiff's table, looking bored and victorious. Cassia Vale sat at the defense table in an orange jumpsuit, looking broken. Judge Cavendish looked at Rowan. Mr. Hart, you have requested a recess to retrieve a witness. You have 5 minutes. If she is not here, I am dismissing your counterclaims and sentencing Ms. Vale for the narcotics found in her locker. She's on her way, Your Honor, Rowan said, sweat dripping down his nose. And I have a new piece of evidence to mark as Exhibit D. More deep fakes? Waverly sneered. No, Rowan smiled, a shark-like grin that unnerved Waverly. Public records. The doors banged open. 2 bailiffs entered, flanking a small figure. Amaya walked in. She was wearing the oversized gray sweatsuit from the group home. She wasn't wearing her glasses, so she squinted, but she walked with a terrifying purpose. She didn't look at her mother. She walked straight to the witness stand. I'm ready, Amaya said. State your name, the clerk said. Amaya Rhodes. I am 8 years old, and I know the truth. Waverly stood up. Objection. Competency. The child is traumatized and prone to fantasies. Your Honor, Amaya said, turning to the judge. I understand the difference between the truth and a lie. A lie is what Mr. Montfort told you when he said he owns this building. The truth is what I am about to show you." Cavendish looked at her. He saw the fire in her blurry eyes. "Overruled. Sit down, child." Rowan stepped up. "Amaya, tell the court what you found regarding the ownership of Kensington Towers." "Rafe Montfort doesn't own it," Amaya said clearly. "He stole it from a dead woman named Elara Thorne. He knew she was alive when he filed for the title. He lied to this court in 2018. "Objection! Hearsay! Speculation!" Waverley shouted. "Where is the proof? The magic notebook is gone." "The proof," Amaya said, pointing a small finger at the judge's computer monitor, "is on your screen, Your Honor. Mr. Hart gave you the file path." Judge Cavendish looked at his screen. He typed in the case number Rowan had provided, 19 CV Wozu 0. He clicked on the document titled Test File Do Not Delete. It opened. It wasn't a test file. It was a PDF. First, the email. Subject, the French problem. Body, we found the granddaughter. Do not contact her. Second, the original deed, signed by Elias Thorne, placing the property in a perpetual charitable trust, meaning it could never be sold to a private developer. Judge Cavendish read the screen. His face went gray. Then it went red. He looked up at Rafe Montfort. Montfort was standing now, his composure shattered. This is a trick. She hacked the court." "Mr. Montfort," Judge Cavendish said, his voice trembling with rage. "This document was uploaded to the court's server 3 days ago. The metadata shows the upload came from the IP address of the public library, but the document itself, the digital signature on this email, it matches your corporate server." The courtroom gasped. "You used this court," Cavendish whispered, his voice rising to a roar. "You used my court as a weapon of theft. You lied to me in 2018. You committed perjury. You committed fraud." "It's a forgery," Waverley screamed. "It is a certified court record now." Cavendish slammed his hand on the bench. "And I am taking judicial notice of it." Amaya leaned into the microphone. "Mr. Waverley," she said softly, "Rule 3.3 of the Rules of Professional Conduct forbids a lawyer from knowingly offering false evidence. You filed the eviction based on a deed you knew was void. That's disbarment." Waverley took a step back from his own client, his hands up. I didn't know. He told me it was clean." "You liar!" Montfort turned on his lawyer. "You wrote the email." "Silence!" Cavendish bellowed. "Bailiff, seal the doors." The bailiffs moved to the exits. Montfort looked around like a trapped animal. "Amaya," the judge said, his voice softening as he looked at the child in the sweatsuit. "Is there anything else?" "Yes, Your Honor," Amaya said. "The drugs in my mother's locker. Mr. Montfort's men planted them. If you check the GPS data on the phone of the man standing by the door, Mr. Montfort's driver, you will see he was at the hospital at the exact time the drugs were found. Montfort's driver, a burly man in the back, turned to run. A bailiff tackled him. It was chaos. It was beautiful." "Cassia Vale," Judge Cavendish said. "The charges against you are dismissed with prejudice. You are free to go." Cassia burst into tears. She vaulted the railing and ran to the witness stand. Amaya jumped into her arms. "We did it, Mama," Amaya whispered, burying her face in her mother's neck. "We beat the shark." The fallout wasn't just a ripple. It was a tsunami. Rafe Montfort didn't make bail this time. The revelation that he had defrauded the court in 2018 triggered a federal investigation. The FBI raided his offices the next morning. They found everything: the bribes, the fake inspections, the shell companies. The Azure District project was dead. The city seized the land. Callum Waverley turned state's witness to save his own skin, testifying against Montfort in exchange for a reduced sentence, though he was permanently disbarred. But the sweetest justice came 2 weeks later. Amaya and Cassia stood in the hallway of Kensington Towers. It was different now. The peeling paint was still there, but the fear was gone. A woman in a sharp suit walked up the stairs. She spoke with a French accent. She was the administrator of the Alara Thorne Charitable Trust. "Miss Vale," the woman said, "I am Isabel. We had no idea this building existed until the news broke. The trust is dedicated to providing affordable housing for artists and families. We are taking over the management effective immediately." She handed Cassia a document. "This is a new lease," Isabel said. "Rent is capped at 30% of your income, and we are beginning full renovations next month, real ones, no evictions." Cassia took the paper, tears streaming down her face. "And for you, mademoiselle," Isabel said, kneeling down to Amaya. She held out a brand new pair of glasses, sleek, stylish frames. "And this." She handed Amaya a letter. It was on heavy, cream-colored stationery. "To Amaya Rhodes, in recognition of your extraordinary legal acumen and defense of the Thorne estate, the Trust has established the Amaya Rhodes Legal Scholarship Fund. Your education is paid for all the way through law school." Amaya put on the new glasses. The world snapped into sharp, beautiful focus. "Thank you," Amaya said. "You saved the building," Isabel said. "You saved everyone." "I just applied the law," Amaya shrugged. "Justice shouldn't be a miracle. It should be the standard." 6 months later. Amaya sat in the back of a university lecture hall. She was 8.5 years old. The professor was discussing contract law. "Can anyone tell me," the professor asked the room full of 20-year-olds, "what constitutes a meeting of the minds?" The students shuffled their papers, looking down. Amaya raised her hand. The professor squinted. "Is that a child?" "Yes, sir," Amaya said. "And the answer is mutual assent, usually established by an offer and an acceptance. However, if one party is operating under fraud, there is no meeting of the minds, and the contract is voidable." The class turned to stare. Amaya smiled. She had a lot to learn, but she had time. She was going to be the greatest lawyer the world had ever seen, and she was just getting started. If this story inspired you to fight for what's right, smash that like button. Share this video to spread the message that no one is too small to make a difference. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories of justice served cold.